You dare to bring the warmth of life into my tomb?
Hello everyone! Diablo contains many interesting and exciting characters, and some of them play a major part in the games. So today I thought it would be interesting to take a look at one of my absolute favorites, the Mad King Leoric himself. Today we know him as the Skeleton King, a major boss in Diablo 1 and 3. But what is his story and how did he eventually become the Skeleton King? That's what we're going to find out in this video. So we don't really know anything about Leoric's origins or his early life, but we do know that he came from the east.
East. Always. Into the east.
More specifically, the great empire of Khacistan, and that he was a devout follower of the Zakarum Faith. And in order to get a better understanding about what happened to Leoric, we first need to explore a few things about the Zakarum. The Zakarum is a religion founded by a wandering ascetic from the mountain island of Shangsai called Akarat. He was a man disillusioned with society and its never-ending conflicts, which caused him to seek peace and enlightenment on the snowy peaks of Shangsai. And one day, while in deep meditation, Akarat claimed to have envisioned a spectacular flash of light and energy that somehow gave him insight about the universe, reality, and even human existence. He attributed this revelation to an angel called Xilith, which we don't really know much about. Some speculate that he might not in fact have been an angel, but rather a demon in disguise, seeking a human to do his bidding. Whether this is true or not, we don't really know for sure, but demons disguising themselves is definitely not unheard of. The best example that comes to my mind would be Baal pretending to be Tyrael and tricking Marius into giving him his soul stone. Another theory is that the light Akarat saw was in fact the echoing result of Uldisian Uldiomet's ultimate self-sacrifice during the Sin War. He had sacrificed himself to save all of humanity and Sanctuary from becoming yet another battleground in the eternal conflict. Spoiler alert. Personally, I think this is the most likely scenario. The reason being that Uldisian eventually became the very essence of peace and goodness. All he wanted was freedom for humanity, to live their lives without angel or demon interference. When he died, his energies were spread throughout creation, and to me at least, it would make perfect sense that this echoing blast of energy is what Akarat saw during his meditation. Especially because what followed his revelation was a journey to the cities of Khacistan to spread the word about a divine light that he believed existed within everyone. What he hoped to achieve by this was simple. If people saw this light within themselves, they would be able to live with goodness and peace in their hearts for the rest of their lives. And this was truly what Uldisian had wished for humanity as he died for their freedom. One day, however, Akarat suddenly vanished into the vast jungles of Khacistan, never to be seen again. Why exactly he did this is a bit unclear, but the general belief is that he was content that he had spread his word to enough people and decided to leave himself. And despite being gone, Akarat's ideals and beliefs were carried on and preached by a few devout followers in the cities of Khacistan. These followers gathered more people to their beliefs and eventually established it as the Zakarum Church. Even though the Zakarum was still a small order, they were approached by the Horadrim during the Dark Exile, who had just captured Mephisto's essence within a soulstone. The leader of the Horadrim, Tyrael, believed that the Zakarum were the only ones that could be trusted with the task of guarding the soulstone. And to make sure Mephisto's soulstone was hidden away safely, the Zakarum started to build what would ultimately become Travancore, a massive temple city within Kurast, the capital of Khacistan. Having completed Travancore, the Zakarum continued to grow and eventually became the dominant political, religious and military power in Khacistan. The leadership was known as the High Council of the Zakarum, and they ruled from the Temple of Light, which was located in the center of Travancore. This temple was also where the Zakarum chose to hide Mephisto's soulstone away in a series of labyrinths beneath it. Okay, so just to summarize for those of you who might be a bit confused. We now have a temple, within a city. Like, I'm not telling anyone what to do here, but if I were Blizzard, I would probably give Christopher Nolan a call, because it sounds a bit like he borrowed too much from the Diablo lore when he made Inception, just saying. Anyway, the Zakarum Church eventually decided to liberate what they saw as the barbaric and uncivilized lands to the west, and to achieve this they sent a champion named Rakis. He led a massive force on a crusade to colonize and civilize the West, while at the same time spreading the word of the Zakarum Faith and extending its influence. When his crusade was finished, Rakis had succeeded in modernizing most parts of the Western world and finally settled in Westmarch, where he ruled as king until his death. Following the crusade of Rakis, the western lands were divided into regions, and to rule these areas, the High Council of the Zakarum sent out a variety of different regional lords. This leads me back to Leoric, because he was one of these lords sent out to rule nearly 2 centuries later. Leoric was assigned the region of Khanduras, and brought with him his family, knights, priest, and most trusted advisor, Lazarus. Despite being a bit skeptical at first, Leoric was finally convinced by Lazarus to settle in the small town of Tristram and turn an old worn-down monastery in the outskirts of the city into their new seat of power. With the intention of being a fair and just ruler, Leoric declared himself king in the name of the Zakarum Church. In the beginning, the people of Khanduras were not really happy being ruled by a foreign king, but Leoric served them with nothing but justice and love. And eventually his people came to love and respect their new king for his purity of heart and just rule. What Leoric didn't know, however, was that before his departure for Khanduras, the High Council of the Zakarum had become corrupted. Because it turned out that the soul stone containing Mephisto's essence was flawed. This had allowed Mephisto to influence the High Council, eventually corrupting and controlling them completely. Mephisto had then ordered Lazarus to accompany Leoric to Khanduras, and once there, he was to convince Leoric to settle on the old monastery in Tristram. Mephisto had a very good reason for this, because his younger brother Diablo, the Lord of Terror, was imprisoned in another soulstone beneath the monastery. The Horadrim had captured him shortly after leaving Mephisto's soulstone with the Zakarum, and Mephisto wanted him free. Oblivious to all of this, Leoric continued his work as king and did so with great success for several years. However, this peace and prosperity was not to last, because meanwhile Lazarus had finally managed to locate and shatter Diablo's soulstone in the labyrinth beneath the monastery. But in order to manifest himself in Sanctuary, Diablo needed a host body to possess. He immediately sought out the strongest soul he could find within reach, and that turned out to be King Leoric. However, Diablo was weak after centuries of imprisonment, and Leoric had a very strong will. He quickly sensed that some evil being was trying to possess and control him, but he couldn't figure out how and why. Leoric now started to fight against Diablo's will for a long time. He decided to keep his condition a secret from his priests and advisors, in the belief that he would be able to exorcise the evil himself. This would turn out to be a huge mistake, because even though he was successful in denying Diablo full control of his body, the struggle started to tear at his sanity and the very essence of his being, and this quickly led to a change in demeanor that his subjects would feel and witness firsthand.
We have just arrived in Tristram, and I must say, I'm a bit dismayed. This place is a backwater filled with serfs and an ancient broken-down monastery, hardly fit for the king of Khanduras. I cannot fathom why Lazarus was so intent on this becoming our new seat of power. I am convinced that some malevolent being is attempting to wrest control of my thoughts away from me. Voices direct me to horrendous acts, and there are times when I seem unable to control my body. Lazarus knows. This is certain. He looks at me strangely when he thinks me otherwise disposed.
As his sanity continued to slip away, the once kind and loving king grew increasingly deranged, cruel, and paranoid. To ensure total obedience from his subjects, Leoric ordered his knights out to the outlying towns, where they would beat and bully the civilians into submission. Anyone questioning his rule or authority were executed immediately. Leoric was now known as the Black King, and as he continued to lose his grip on reality, he eventually executed his own wife Xilith for conspiring against him. Despite pleading for her innocence, Lazarus, who was now also a servant of Diablo, had convinced Leoric of his wife's treason.
My lord, the prisoner is ready, as you requested.
Thank you, Lazarus. Your loyalty is invaluable in the midst of all these traitors. And you, my dear, my own wife and queen, conspiring against our kingdom.
My love, I swear, I have never betrayed you.
Lies. Until the very end.
Eventually, the king's council started to question whether or not their king was still fit to rule, and this made Lazarus very nervous that his mission to find a host for his master would fail. Therefore, he quickly devised a plan to get rid of anyone who might stand against him. He did this by convincing Leoric that the neighboring kingdom of Westmarch was planning to invade Khanduras. The king now blindly trusted his corrupted advisor, and the false news of invasion sent him into a frenzy of rage. Of course, all of his advisors pleaded for the king to see reason, but Leoric just rewarded their concerns with diplomatic missions far away or executions. Leoric's oldest son, Aiden, seeking his father's approval, then volunteered to lead the armies of Khanduras against Westmarch together with Lagdanan, who was captain of the royal guard. As they went off to war, some portion of Leoric's spirit continued to fight against Diablo's attempts at possession. Realizing that he would never be able to fully control Leoric, Diablo finally gave up and started to seek another host. Even though he had done the impossible and fought off a primeval's attempt of possession, Leoric was left a broken man and all pretense of his sanity had been lost. Unfortunately, his suffering did not end here, because Diablo had now ordered Lazarus to kidnap Leoric's youngest son Albrecht, who was to serve as a new vessel for the Lord of Terror. As soon as Leoric discovered that his son was gone, he went into a bloodthirsty rage. He was convinced that the townspeople of Tristram had stolen his son, and he made them pay dearly. He had most of the remaining townspeople rounded up for execution, and he placed their heads on spikes around the city.
Though my council begs me to reconsider, I will continue with the executions of those I find guilty of plotting against the kingdom. Perhaps they fear my eye will fall on them and discover their heinous, treasonous plans as well. Lazarus is the only one I can still trust. I have finally rid myself of the dark influence seeking to subdue me, and now I see things as they truly are. This conspiracy among the insolent townsfolk to weaken me by stealing Albrecht away will not stand. Perhaps the heads of their women and children on pikes will bring them clarity.
The time of my lord's true awakening is at hand. That fool Leoric was only able to resist him because he did not yet possess his full power. With the queen dispatched as a traitor, I may now devote myself fully to preparing the boy for the presence of my master.
By this time, the war against Westmarch had gone horribly wrong. As the dominant military force in Sanctuary, the small insignificant army of Khanduras were no match against the armies of Westmarch. Finally convinced that any further attacks would be futile, Lagdanan ordered what remained of King Leoric's forces back to Khanduras. When Lagdanan returned and saw what his once beloved king had done to the innocent civilians of Tristram, he was horrified and disgusted. He confronted Leoric and was finally convinced of the king's complete madness and loss of sanity when Leoric called him a traitor and ordered him executed immediately. Instead, Lagdanan decided to put an end to his king, and with the help of his knights, he killed Leoric, finally ending his reign of madness.
Keep your distance from him. This burden is mine to bear. May death bring peace from your madness, Leoric.
Traitors! Even in death the armies of Khanduras will still obey their king, even if you will not.
With Leoric now gone, the people of Tristram began the heavy task of rebuilding their lives. However, they would not be allowed to do so for long, because Diablo, now possessing Leoric's younger son Albrecht, had sinister plans for the deceased king. He raised him as the Skeleton King, a massive undead skeleton of pure evil with nothing left of his humanity. The Skeleton King immediately started to raise an army of skeletons from the corpses of townspeople resting below the monastery, and used them to attack the living that remained in Tristram. Fortunately, Leoric's oldest son Aiden finally returned to Tristram during this time. He had hoped to find solace in his home after a long war, but instead he found a city in ruins, a missing younger brother, and a dead father who has come back to haunt the living. Aiden vowed to find his brother and put an end to the Skeleton King's reign, and so he journeyed deep into the catacombs below the monastery, where he eventually found and killed the Skeleton King, allowing his father to rest. For a while at least, because 20 years later, the powers of a falling star would reawaken all those in Tristram who had been unjustly slain in the past, and the Skeleton King was among these.
The power of the fallen star awakened me, and soon all will suffer as I have suffered. Gods, bring me his bones!
He immediately started to raise his army again and attack the citizens of New Tristram. Fortunately, this only lasted a few days, because a Nephilim hero arrived in New Tristram and fought off the hordes of undead skeletons, and finally laid King Leoric's tortured soul to rest. I hope you all enjoyed the story about King Leoric, the Skeleton King. As always, please don't hesitate to let me know if I made any mistakes or forgot to mention something in the comments below, where you can also ask me any questions you might have. If you want more Diablo lore, of course you do, why wouldn't you? You can also check out my other videos or grab yourself one of the Diablo novels available pretty much everywhere. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you enjoyed this video. Until next time guys, thank you for watching.